Hey, how you doing, folks? So Foxborough Supercross was this past weekend. I know I've been really putting this off, and it's already Friday evening where I am. And I'll tell you what, that race at Foxborough, I had to rewatch that race because I had gone to Hawaii softball with UH versus UC Riverside in a doubleheader. And as it turned out, UH ended up winning that one. But I'm going to talk about Supercross this time. Or better yet, we might as well call that Mud Cross, that last race at Foxborough. So, but first of all, guys, remember, subscribe. If you think that I'm worth listening to, that's good enough for me. I don't have the same kind of insight as someone like Cooksey does, but you know what? If you think I'm worth listening to, that's good enough for me. Because I got a good opinion on this and that, and I have quite a bit of things to say about this race. So we're going to get this one out of the way right now. But remember, subscribe if you think I'm worth listening to. And with that being said, let's get into this. So I'm going to start with the 250 class here. First career win for Chance Hymas. 3 first-timers on the podium. Tom Vialle dodged a bullet. Now, Chance Hymas winning on a track like that, oh, man, I would never have thought that we would have a first-time winner in Chance Hymas on a track like that. Because let me tell you, I've seen some really bad mud races on TV in my tenure, but that was probably the worst I'd seen of these conditions in almost 20 years. And really, whoever constructed this schedule is going to face a lot of heat in the coming weeks, sooner or later. Because really, to hold a Supercross in the Northeast at this time of the year, now I agree. Now, I agree that the Northeast does deserve some races up there, but really, to hold it at that time of the year, no, that wasn't wise, because that's the time of year where all the rain comes in and the conditions are just completely unbearable. You know, I thought Troy, Ohio and motocross was pretty hot and just unbearable heat, but obviously dry heat. And of course, Vegas has been known to be pretty hot, obviously because they call it the desert. And sometimes Salt Lake City has been known to be cold. And I can remember they went to Chicago in 2000. And that was obviously a cold one as well. But I think the fact that it wasn't even raining that night in Chicago in 2000 was a lot more bearable and a lot more better to watch, aside from the fact that it was still the Jeremy McGrath era. So obviously, for getting back to this year, Chance Hymas to win in conditions like that, the guy who comes from Pocatello, Idaho, to win in conditions like that is something I never would have predicted, like I said. But good for Chance to finally win a Supercross, especially when his season has kind of been pretty lethargic. And I'm sure that the factory Honda team were expecting Chance to fight for the championship, and so far it has not worked out. And but for Chance Hymas to win this race, that's great. And you know what they say, if you can ride the sand, you can ride in the mud, you can ride in any condition that Mother Nature throws at you. And for Chance Hymas to put himself in that particular category, that's a bold statement for sure, especially for someone from the West Coast. Whereas Idaho, I don't know their weather, but they probably get a lot of sun and snow at a certain time of the year. The sun at a certain time of the year, snow at a certain time of the year, all this and that. But still, Chance Hymas winning this race, that feels really, really good. Is that going to parlay him into getting more career wins? I don't know. I sure hope so. Because everybody says that the first one's the hardest, and I agree with them. But once the first one comes, everything comes easiest. But don't tell that to guys like Billy Laninovich and Matt Walker and Damon Huffman, because all those guys are one-hit wonders, whether it's the 125 class at the time or the 250 class at the time, or if you want to call it the 250 class and 450 class today. So we had 3 first-timers on the podium. Chance Hymas, one of those guys, at least for this year anyway. Gage Linwood on the podium. In fact, Chance Hymas was followed by 2 privateers. And I was actually very surprised by that, because for those guys, that's the only good thing about mud races, because you get guys up there that you don't normally hear of who struggle in the dry and yet excel in these sloppy conditions. Take Jacob Marsack, for instance. How many of you guys remember Daytona 2008 when Chad Reed, his bike went up in smoke and he ended up 7th? Well, 6th really, but penalized 1 position after that. And that opened the door for Jacob Marsack to get on the podium as a privateer. And Chance Hymas was followed by 2 privateers in that race. And Cullen Park and Gage Linville. I had to look. That's why I was looking away, just to make sure that I got it right. But I'll do my best to try to get my recaps out of the way quickly instead of just putting it off for so long. But I don't think I should have a problem this week, because softball's on the road, and so is baseball. I don't follow baseball, though. The only team that's home for University of Hawaii is men's volleyball. Okay? So I was very happy to see those 2 guys on the podium, Gage Linville and Cullen Park. Because if the conditions had worked out and we had dodged a bullet like we did at Seattle, something tells me that Linville and whoever was on the podium, Cullen Park, I'm sorry, that Cullen Park and Gage Linville, they would not be on the podium if it was dry conditions. I'm going to say that right now. But that's just the way the night worked out, you know. And you've already heard me say something about my 450 recap that's on my 450 banner. That's going to come a little bit later. But this one I also have to talk about. Tom Vialle dodged a bullet, because Tom Vialle, this was a race that I expected him to at least be on the podium, and it looked that way. Unfortunately, one of the next shots showed Vialle down on the ground and trying to get back to his bike. And as a result, Vialle was credited with 22nd. I'm not sure if he was DQ'd or whatnot. I don't think he was. But then again, that was a very tough track to even ride on. To even complete a lap, if you're a privateer or something, or a privateer that runs around in the back, you would have been very, very lucky to complete a lap, unless you got really good mud skills. But Tom Vialle dodging a bullet, because Seth Hammaker finished in 9th. And as of right now, the points chase for the East Coast is tied up between Vialle and Seth Hammaker. And if Tom Vialle is going to make it back-to-back titles for KTM in the 250s, he's going to have to really put his mud skills to good use again, because it looks like Philly could be another mud race if the rain doesn't hold off. But even if Philly does not turn out to be a mud race, like I said before, whoever constructed this schedule is going to face a ton of heat in the coming weeks. I guarantee it right now. And there is a very good chance we may very well not see a Supercross in the Northeast at this time of the year. If you're going to look for other venues, you should really consider some dome stadiums, because, or even some, or if you're going to look at some of the open air stadiums, maybe you should consider going back to some other venues that Supercross used to visit. I can remember Ford Field or in Detroit when back in the day it was the Pontiac Silverdome, and that was always, you guarantee that's a dome stadium for sure, so the elements aren't going to matter. And I'm not sure why that ended up not being on the schedule, Ford Field I'm talking about. But if you're going to look for open air stadiums on the East Coast, go to Orlando, Florida, because that was the site of my first race back when it was the Citrus Bowl and Carmichael was on a 125 at the time. That was the site of my first Supercross back in 97 that I started watching on ESPN2. So whoever constructs the 26 schedule, you had better kind of start using a little common sense to really make it a level playing field. Now, if the weather comes in areas that you didn't think were going to get some rain, like Daytona, for example, that's not known for rain, but occasionally it does get. But Daytona has had its fair share of mud races. You just don't expect it at that time of the year, even if it's not the rainy season. And of course, Daytona being bike week, obviously everybody cares about that. That's one of the biggest weeks of the entire year. Next to Anaheim 1, Daytona is the race to be at. Okay? And anyway, as far as Foxborough goes, fortunately, Tom Vialle is still in contention for the championship. I hope he wins it. I'm going to say that right now. And I have to say, though, that Tom is continuously proving me wrong on one side of the coin, because after Vialle didn't have to deal with many whoops at all in 24, now he is. He's starting to look a lot better through the whoop sections this season. Now, obviously, last weekend was not really a good example because of all the inclement weather and all that. But still, if Vialle can avoid those kinds of mistakes, I'm not going to doubt that he's going to win this title, let alone pull off a Tim Ferry. Because that's what I think Tom Vialle is going to do. Okay? So let that little thing stick in your mind. So now to the 450s. Aaron Plessinger wins second career race. And you've already heard me say this. I hate mud races. The only good thing about them is that you do see guys that you don't normally hear of who do well in these adverse conditions. A textbook example, who finished second place in the 450 class? Shane McElrath. Holy crap. I couldn't have felt so much better. I couldn't have felt so good for him, because McElrath has had his fair share of troubles after he got pointed out of the 250s and he's not eligible to return. And for Shane to get on the podium on that quad lock Honda, something tells me that Shane McElrath, I don't think anybody had him in second place on their bingo cards on the fantasy site. I certainly didn't. I certainly did not would put Shane McElrath for second place. Now, the only exception that I have to mud races are actually two of them, because one of them I was just talking about right now. All the guys that you don't normally hear of, like the privateers or whatnot, or guys like Shane McElrath on the privateer support teams putting in great rides. The only other exception, this one really doesn't exist anymore, if Chad Reed wins them. But obviously, Chad Reed's retired, and those days are long over. But through the years, I can remember Seattle 18, and I thought that there was going to be a surprise face on the podium. There wasn't. The only thing that was really worth watching was Chad Reed trying to push his bike up to the finish, and he still made it on the timing and scoring loop, despite the fact that he didn't get over the finish line jump. But for Aaron Plessinger to win his second career race, good on him. I had a feeling he was going to win one of these sooner or later, but he's got to prove himself in the dry, because if Plessinger wins all his races, when Plessinger calls it a career and he hasn't won a race on a dry track, I have a feeling that everybody's going to remember the fact that he won those races, the two races that he won, San Diego last year and Foxborough this year. They're probably going to remember him as the guy who won in the mud, the guy who could only win in the mud. But, I mean, look at other guys who won races in the mud. One example off the top of my head, Daryl Hurley, who won the World Supercross at Seville. That was a total quagmire, too. And aside from that, he didn't really do much then. That was in 2003, in December, while preparing for Supercross 2004. And another example, I talked about it earlier, Jacob Marsack, who hit the podium at Daytona in 2008 when it was that total slop fest. And but still, for Aaron Plessinger to win that race, you gotta feel really good for him. But I would really like to see him do well in the dry and win a race in the dry. And I have to say, though, the disappointment story of all has to go to Chase Sexton, because he was looking really good. I thought for sure that he was going to make up a big bucket of points on Cooper Webb, but it didn't work out. Instead, Webb fights his way up to third, and I think Sexton finished in sixth. And at this point, unless Chase Sexton pulls off something heroic, this title chase could very well be over. And, you know, for a title chase to be decided in situations like that is practically an injustice. Okay? I mean, Andrew Short knows that feeling, because he lost the West title in the 250s in 2006 because the final round of Seattle was a complete mud fest. Okay? So really, while I hate mud races with a passion, there were some good takeaways, like some of the guys who made the podium, like I was talking about just a little while ago. So now we head to Philly. There's a chance that it could be a mud race. But even if it doesn't, like I said earlier, whoever constructed this schedule is going to face a lot of heat. Okay? And I think that it's about time that when you look at that time of the year, you need to go for stadiums that are closed roof, like Ford Field in Detroit, or even the new stadium in Minneapolis, or somewhere else. But if you're going to get an open air stadium on the East Coast, I think maybe it's time to start considering putting Orlando back on the schedule. Because Orlando Citrus Bowl is an open air stadium, but if you hold it in like March or April, you're likely not going to get the bad weather, because it's just that time of the year. And I'm sure that Florida gets the good weather year round. And on occasion, and you know, the state of Hawaii is pretty much the same story. Like, we have our rainy days, but it's not consistent rain like what you see on the East Coast during the rainy season, you know. Because I'm sure, like, you know, or even some other foreign country for that matter. Because foreign countries, they get their fair share of rain for multiple days, okay? But to have a race like that is not only like what we saw at Foxborough, that almost made it not worth watching. So, but still, aside from all that, I'm really happy for Aaron Plessinger. I'm really happy for Chase Sexton, or I'm sorry, Chance Hymas, and also Shane McElrath and even Gage, Linville, Cullen Park for getting on the podium. But really, when it comes to this time of year, you need to start going to closed stadiums, because quite often you're going to get conditions like what we saw at Foxborough at this time of the year. Chances are probably 60-40 that you will see bad conditions. Okay? And obviously, that's where I'll leave it. So, thanks, guys. Subscribe. We'll see you all after Philly. I should be able to see that one because softball's on the road. And they ended up winning 9-0 at Cal State Bakersfield. So, anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you after Philly. And remember, subscribe. See you all again.